On a Sphere's Edge. Written by Keith Mosher. Narrated by Keith Mosher. Chapter 7. A Balance of Power. As Alexandria and Zeal floated in the open space between the orbit lanes and the planetary boundary net, Alex began to move about the ship, making herself feel more at home. "So, Zeal, why didn't you learn to fly? Most kids can't wait." Zeal followed her lead and began to find places that made him comfortable. It just never came up. It was always easier, especially as a youngster, to just buy a ticket rather than to learn to pilot, do the testing, get a license, and get a ship. I do intend to learn to fly. It would be a lot more convenient for me these days, but it's going to take some time. Alex was a bit surprised. She had assumed he avoided piloting to help him hide as a thief. She never considered that getting a license had simply slipped by him. Moreover, his desire to get a pilot's ticket now meant that he was less concerned with the tracking that licenses, AODTs, and ships carry with them. "Of course it is. It takes years. I started as a teen learning to fly in the atmosphere. In my late teens, I learned orbit regulations and interstellar flight when I was in my early 20s. And most people told me I was a quick study." The ship was divided into three main sections. The forward cabin and flight control area was designed for 2 people only. The mid-section was a lounge. It was a rectangular room, split down the middle by the main aisle that ran the entire length of the ship. Facing toward the front of the ship, a sectional sofa ran the length of the left-hand wall of the lounge. The sofa had pull-down drink and meal trays. The right-hand side was a bath facility, kitchenette, and some storage cabinets. The aft section was subdivided into 2 smaller areas. The section next to the lounge was a sleep area with 2 double bunks, one on each side of the aisle, with a few storage cabinets and enough room to lay out a cot or sleeping bag. The extreme back section was storage, emergency equipment, and engine access. The 2 of them bustled about, making bunks and stashing away the few things they had with them. Zeal tossed his bag on the top right-hand bunk, and then moved to the lounge and called up a music menu and selected some tunes that suited him. Then he punched up another menu and selected some snacks and 2 drinks, which he removed from the provisions dispenser and placed in the holding clamps of one of the fold-down trays. Alex flung her personal bag on the top left-hand bunk, and then returned to the forward area, always keeping the sphere-laden briefcase with her. When she got to the pilot's seat, she looked around and found a cabinet large enough to hold the briefcase. She stuffed the case inside for safekeeping. Zeal went to the forward section and took the remaining chair. "How's it going, Alex?" Alex looked up from her study and smiled at him. "That's the first time you've used my nickname. It felt nice. Thanks." She returned her attention to the console. "I don't know how it's going. I've been running simulations on this thing. The hypergeometries aren't right. It spooks me." She poked the console off with finality and shook her head at the results as they came up on the screen. She spun away from the console and looked at Zeal. "Anyway, we left Orbit 10 a few minutes ago. We'll reach the net boundary soon. I have been running some calculations. The best this bucket will do is about a level 8 density wave. If, and that is a big if this ship will actually do that, we'll reach Earth in almost 3 hours. Assuming the 3P police sent HQ a notice when we recited in 20s Town, we will be on Earth nearly a full day before HQ learns I was on 3P. Zeal nodded. "Great. That'll give us plenty of lead time." Then, after a short pause, he said, "You realize I'm going to need to know more about your problem to help you solve it." Alex swiveled back to the control desk. "Let me think about that. Right now I just want to get us into hyperspace safely." She watched the consoles and indicators. The sensors indicated that they had left the net boundary. "That's it. We're free to enter hyperspace. Let's see what this thing will do." She buckled herself in and then danced her fingers across the console as she laid in the calculations. and then shut her eyes as she tapped the hyperhole icon. Both Alex and Zeal felt the sink in the middle of their stomachs as the density wave generators drilled a pit in normal space and the craft fell into the artificial wormhole. Suddenly, the ship began to shudder. Items within the cabin began to rattle and bounce. Then came an almost deafening howl, a horrific screech resonating from the exterior skin of the ship into the cabin like a gigantic fingernail being slowly scraped along a galactic-sized blackboard. Alex's training stepped in. She shouted conditions at the top of her lungs.
Inertial breakers are offline. Artificial gravity failing. Wait, there it goes.
There was a deep, loud crack. Zeal had not engaged his safety webs, so he was lifted from his chair. No shit. Alex glanced over her shoulder at him and then returned her attention to the instruments and shouted,
"Hang on!"
Zeal reached out to grab the seat, but the thrust of his reach caused him to free-fall away from his target. Alex worked feverishly at the controls.
Almost got it.
She fought the buffeting of the vessel as she rerouted systems. Then, without warning or dignity, Zeal slammed to the floor. What the hell is going on? Alex continued to fight the ship and make corrections at the console.
No time to worry about the breakers. Just hold on.
She checked systems and made adjustments with all the skills at her command. Zeal struggled down the aisle to the rear of the ship, bouncing from wall to wall, and shouted, "Just get out of hyperspace!"
Can't. Trust me. Where are you going? On the floor.
Evac suits.
Ignorant coward.
Better coward than dead. Slowly, the rattling began to subside, but the horrible howling screech continued. Gradually, the ship calmed down, the rattling stopped, and lastly, the screeching gave way to a dull, low rumble. All the while, Alex worked at top speed on the console and other instruments. As the screech ended, Zeal arrived timidly in the forward cabin, clutching an evac suit. "Are we gonna live?" He was deadly serious.
Yes, we'll live. Give me a moment, okay?
Alex continued to tap and dance across the console and controls of various instruments. Suddenly, the bulkhead shield between the lounge and sleep quarters slammed shut. The music shut off in the lounge and the lights dimmed. After several minutes of intensive work, all the while Zeal sitting on the floor clinging to the evac suit, Alex stopped her work and spun her chair around. She released her security web, leaned forward, and lowered her head into her palms. After a few moments of silence, she breathed a deep sigh. I've had to reduce speed, shut down life support in the aft section, and conserve energy throughout the ship. Music and provisions are offline, lighting is reduced, and I've lowered the heating units in here. It's going to get cold, but bearable. Are you all right? Zeal looked at his position on the floor and regained some self-composure. Yeah, I'm okay. I'll probably be sore tomorrow. He got up, tossed the evac suit into the lounge, and then sat in the co-pilot's chair. What happened? The hyperhull geometries were off. They were just too tight around the ship. The power supply is unstable. That produced... She stopped and looked at him. Do you really want to know? Zeal looked at her earnestly. Well, yes. I really do want to learn this stuff. Alex was actually pleased. It was another way for them to connect, and a way for her to repay some of the help Zeal had given her. Okay, do you know what a singularity is? Zeal answered with a questioning tone, as unsure pupils often do. A black hole? Sounding a bit like a pleased tutor, Alex said, Very good. How about a wormhole? Zeal grimaced. That one has always given me a bit of trouble. I mean, I understand the basic idea, but I've never been able to put a wormhole and a black hole together in my mind. Alex waved her hand in a sign that it was all right. They aren't the same at all. Wormholes come out of quantum mechanics and are beyond microscopic, but the effect has some bearing. As long as you have the basic idea, that will do. Alex went on to give a brief lesson in hyperholes and hyperspace in order to get Zeal to a point where he could understand what had just happened. So, a black hole is so heavy, so dense, that it punches a hole in the fabric of the space-time continuum. A ship's density field generators affect space like a black hole while keeping us safe inside. The density wavefront emitters project an artificial, oversized wormhole ahead of the ship. The two effects put a ship in an elongated hyperspace bubble. The ship is no longer in normal space and is being sucked toward the front of the hyperhole, which is constantly being produced further ahead of the ship. The stronger the density wave, the faster the apparent speed of travel. Are you good so far?
Zeal nodded his head. Yes, I've heard this before, but each time I get a little better grasp on it. So what happened to us?
Alex smiled at him. So much of this stuff is high-end physics and quantum mechanics. Most pilots do not understand it. They just know which buttons to push. But the more you know, the better. So what happened to us? Well, the hyperhole is typically a few meters larger than the diameter of a craft, making sure that the ship can safely fit in it. It is also about a kilometer or so longer than the ship, most of which is ahead of it, with plenty of safe clearance behind it as well. In this case, the hyperhole was just millimeters larger than the diameter of the ship. That was caused by poor engine design and power distribution to the density field generators. On top of that, the power supply to the density wavefront emitters is unstable, causing the hyperhole to breathe and fluctuate in diameter. At times, the hole almost touched the skin of the ship. There is always small debris and gases that tag along with a vessel. When the hyperhole touched the debris close to the ship, the debris scratched along the outer skin as it got ripped out of the hyperhole. That was the screeching, scratching sound we heard. I'll bet your pretty paint job looks like shit right now. What I had to do was direct more power to the field generators to expand the hole's diameter, and to the wavefront emitters to help make the hole more stable. Zeal looked puzzled, but seemed to be drinking in the lesson.
Okay, I think I got that. But why couldn't you just get us out of hyperspace?
To exit hyperspace, you rarefy the density field. That is, you gradually decrease the amount of artificial density that surrounds the ship until it is almost not a singularity. Think of it as the lightest possible black hole. Any lighter, any less dense, and it is no longer a black hole. At that point, the density wave and field generators instantaneously shut off. That's why it's called the sublight pop. We're popped into normal space, though I often think of it as bouncing up from the bottom of a deeply stretched trampoline. If I had tried to shut down the density generators with those power and field fluctuations, normal space would have crashed in on us like the collapsing walls of a pit.
Zeal sat for a moment, digesting the lesson. He rubbed his shoulder and flexed the arm he had landed on. Alex got up and gave his shoulder a rub.
I had to reduce power all over the ship and direct it into the field generators. Also, to get more control over the hyperhole fluctuations, I had to reduce our apparent speed. That allowed me to reduce the stresses on the wavefront emitters.
Alex went to one of the dispensers in the lounge and tapped up a drink, but the keypad returned a bleat that reminded her that provisions were offline.
Damn. 20 hours without food or drink. Well, it could be worse.
Zeal got up and headed into the lounge as well. He tapped Alex's shoulder and pointed to the pulled-down tray. The snacks and drinks he had laid out earlier were a bit shaken about, but the clamps and lids had managed to contain most of what was inside.
"It isn't much, but it's in here and not in there," he said as he pointed to one of the dispenser doors. The two of them sat down and eyed the small meal held in place on the tray. Both of them seemed to know to wait. 20 hours with little food is not life-threatening, but it could feel like a long time in a cold ship. Alex eyed the evac suit that was laying at the opposite end of the sofa. "By the way, Zeal, if you had been able to get that evac suit on and then been lucky enough to blow a hatch without blowing apart the ship, while you exited the craft, you would have also exited the hyperhole.
contact with normal space would have shaved off each exposed portion of you as you left the hole, like a deli slicer slicing cheese. Well, that may not be accurate. You would have been smeared. They call it spaghettification. In my opinion, it isn't enough to know which buttons to push. You have to understand where you are and what is going on. There are only two options in a hyperspace incident: repair the damage or die. She reflected how that explanation resembled her current situation. The seriousness of piloting sank in on Zeal. He wondered if he would ever get a good handle on it. It seemed so absolute. He preferred to have alternatives and backups. The two of them sat quietly in the lounge for a time. Zeal sipped at his bourbon and soda, and occasionally nibbled on some Renarian eggs and crackers. "Earlier you said 20 hours without food or drink." He raised an eyebrow in solicitation. Alex was in deep thought, her mind drifting toward the briefcase in the forward cabin, and desires to use its power to put all things right. Zeal's query brought her back to the lounge within the XB-3. "Oh, yes, well, as I said, I've had to reduce the forward density wavefront. It'll take us about 20 hours to reach Earth now." Zeal picked up another Renarian egg, eyed it, thought better of it, and replaced it on the tray. "So that gives you almost no lead time, if the 3P police sent a message to HQ. Alex picked up the drink container that Zeal had prepared for her. "Exactly." She opened the lid, looked inside, sniffed the drink, and then chuckled. "Pleiades pleasures. Thanks, Zeal. I'll need this before this trip is over." She sipped the drink and then replaced it on the tray. "Unfortunately, messages arrive directly at their destination. We'll have to land, get a cab or something, and on and on. For all intent and purposes, there's no lead time at all, with one possible exception." She took a cracker from the tray. "HQ will know I was on 3P, but they will not necessarily know where I am heading. But," she stopped and munched the cracker as she contemplated. The cabin was feeling cooler. Zeal got up and removed a blanket from a storage cabinet and tossed it on the sofa next to Alex. She looked at the blanket. "Thanks, but I'll just keep your coat on if you don't mind." "I don't mind. The blanket is for me." "But what?" "I have good reason to believe that whoever is after me has access to my psych files. They will not know for sure where I am going, but they will be able to make a good guess." Zeal picked up the evac suit and looked at it with disappointed disgust. He scrunched up the suit as best he could, stuffing most of it inside the helmet, and then shoved the mass into the cabinet the blanket had come from. Returning to the sofa, he sat down, pulling the blanket between him and Alex. "If I knew more about what the exact situation is, what your item is all about, I could be more helpful. I mean, they may have your psych files, but it isn't only your psychology that matters now." Alex shot out of her seat. She wondered how much Zeal already knew, how much he had figured out. "What do you mean by that? How do you know it isn't only my psychology that matters?" She feared he may have somehow learned about the sphere and its connection with her mind. Zeal faced her. "I mean, I'm with you now. There are two psychologies involved, and they don't have as extensive psych files on me as they do on you." Alex was embarrassed. She had been so preoccupied with the ship and her plans. Her thoughts had become too self-centric. She sat back down. "I'm sorry, I see your point. I don't know how much I can tell you. You already know that I believe it is an affiliate or fleet official that is after me. I don't think I should tell you much more than that." Zeal picked up the folded blanket and laid it across his knees. "Let me tell you what I already know." He grabbed his bourbon and soda and studied the cup as he spoke. "I know, as you just repeated, that some official is after you, or actually they are after your item. I know that your item is the root cause of your situation. I know that you were forced into this situation with the item by following orders, which you then felt the need to disobey. as we already talked about when we left my place. Zeal sipped his drink, allowing the pause to punctuate his statements.
What a person does carries more weight than what they might say. You have a reputation of being by the book. That also translates into having a high-minded moral attitude. You said you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Your morality would have kept you from being in the wrong place unless you were ordered to be there. Those orders caused you to come into contact with the item. Once you figured out what the item represented, your morality told you that you couldn't follow those orders anymore. The police told me you are MIA, so the fleet is looking for your item, but they don't want to draw attention to the search. You said that, let me see if I can repeat this exactly, an affiliate or fleet official is after me. You were going to say they are after the item. From those facts, I know your item represents power. Power comes in many forms. Which one your item represents, I can only guess.
He sipped his drink again, intentionally. He wanted to open the discussion to see how she would react, and perhaps to get more information. Alex distanced herself during Zeal's monologue. He was sharper than she had given him credit for. His interpersonal skills impressed her greatly, giving her a new respect for him, but also frightened her. He could figure out too much from too little. She got up, went to the kitchenette, leaned against the counter, and folded her arms across her chest, in part to keep warm, and in part to emotionally protect herself. How do you know it represents power and not something else like credits or rare artwork?
I doubt the item is anything as trivial as that. First, unless you have some unique form of portable safe or stasis field, those things would not emit the EM frequencies that your item does. Also, you are too much by the book. You wouldn't hang on to something meaningless like that. There's no morality in it. Your morality would force you to hand the item over to them if they ordered you to, if the item is just a simple trinket such as credits or artwork. But power is a different thing. Power that can help an official move higher up, or power to help the affiliate to leverage a government, or the fleet to take over the affiliate. These are the types of things a person would steal for. You said, and I quote, "A few months, hell, a few decades won't be long enough." Credits and artwork are fleeting and easily obtained by simpler means. Higher-ups with money would simply offer to buy you out. Everyone has a price. But power, real power, might last for generations. But that power might be meaningless if not acted on at the right time. Whoever is after you seems to want you at all costs, and they want you now while still keeping as low a profile as possible. Documents, military secrets, a weapon, all forms of power that if used at the right time might create a regime that could last for centuries. I will also tell you this. The fleet does not know your item emits EM waves. The fleet police on 3P did not scan for your item. They scanned for people only. Zeal sipped his drink again, and then set down the cup and looked at Alex with an expression that asked, "What do you think of that?" Alex began to putter about the kitchenette, replacing little items that had gotten jostled during their scrape with normal space. "You know enough about my situation already. I can't see why I should tell you anything else. It would just put both of us in more jeopardy. I don't know enough about you yet, except that you're an ex-con and you're very, very astute." In an effort to move the conversation away from herself and her secret, she asked, "Why haven't you told me what you do yet?" "You mean what I do for a living?" Zeal smiled as he lounged back on the sofa. He opened the blanket and laid it across his legs and waist, and then put his hands behind his head. Alex nodded. "Yes. How does an ex-con make so many credits and connections?" Zeal picked up his feet and stretched his legs out along the sofa. The sofa, with its rectangular shape and small wings, was large enough to accommodate his full length and still provide Alex enough room to sit comfortably on either wing. "It started just a few hours after I was released from the Penn asteroid.
The first job was to obtain duplicates of documents from the United Earth government. That got me another job, which led to the next, and so on. It's simple, really. I use the skills I have, but now I put them to more legal uses. Legal depending on whose laws you use. Alex returned from the kitchenette, picked up her drink, and sat down on the wing of the sofa near Zeal's head. You mean you're still a thief? You just steal documents instead of jewels, paintings, and stuff like that. She took a big shot from her Pleiades pleasures. No, I wouldn't say that I'm a thief. I do obtain items sometimes, though. If a criminal has stolen something, I get it back. Criminals do not report thefts of stolen goods to the affiliate or the local authorities. I procure the stolen goods from them and sell them back to the owner's insurance companies. Remember about 8 months ago when the Mona Lisa was taken from the Louvre in New Europe? Yes, and a few months later it was returned. The criminals were never found. And several months ago the Eridas Equus was taken from the Unata Museum in Ergo. And Pop, Lloyd's of Ergo, returns the Equus, and all the news reports pointed out that they had recovered it at a fraction of its estimated worth. A fraction of the Equus's worth is still a hell of a lot of credits. But it isn't only items taken from criminals and sold back to insurance companies. I've made a tidy sum off the Cainites and the Amans. I guess you know the two of them are getting ready to go to war over a barren little planet they both want. I've obtained military secrets from both sides and provided them to a third party who wants to keep an eye on things. Unofficially. Zeal stopped to watch Alex. Soon the expression he had been waiting to see would present itself. Alex took another blast from her drink, got up, and walked up and down the aisle for a moment, thinking. She stopped and looked at Zeal in disbelief. You're a spy. She sat down again, this time on the wing next to Zeal's feet. Well, the side that loses information might call me a spy. The side that gets information would call me a patriot, or at least an agent. I've been called a repossessor. I repossess stolen items and return them to insurance companies for a fraction of the cost of reimbursement to the victim. I've been called an undercover agent. I've obtained secrets for governments, usually with better results than their information agencies. I prefer to think of myself as a private eye. I work on a contractual basis, case by case, contract by contract, item by item. My first client, the one that contacted me the day I left the Pan asteroid, and the one that has brought me the most business of all, has been the fleet. He stopped, ready to see the reaction he had been waiting for. Alex stood up and froze. Her jaw literally dropped open. She began to speak, but could not determine what to say. She turned and stormed up the aisle to burn off some of the energy within her, but stopped, stunned. She turned back to Zeal and began to speak again, but still speechless she leaned against the kitchenette. Zeal sprang into a sitting position and slapped his thigh. There it is! That's the expression I was waiting to see! He began a deep, almost uncontrollable laugh. Zeal's laugh turned Alex's heat into a raging boil. Damn it! You've been setting me up! You're taking me right to them, you son of a bitch! She marched to the forward cabin, sat down at the controls, and began gesturing. Zeal's laugh quickly died. What? Wait, what do you mean? He got up, but suddenly the bulkhead between the lounge and the forward cabin slammed shut, cutting Zeal off from her. He punched the intercom. Alex, come on! I thought we were getting to know each other. What are you doing? I'm going to pop into normal space and then shove you out of a hatch. She paused for a moment and then raised her hand, pointer finger extended, mimicking Zeal. Or maybe I'll just cut off the life support in the lounge and let you freeze and suffocate to death. That's a slow and painful way to go. Zeal was taken back. He was sincere in his desire to help Alex for all the reasons he had given her. Certainly he was curious about her item, but curiosity is not itself a crime or a reason to harm a friend. He liked his current lifestyle and had no desire to risk it. He had been completely upfront with her. Her reaction caught him off guard.
Alex, I guess I just didn't think it through. I see your position, but seriously, I meant everything I have told you. I was and am completely serious about why I want to help you. Honestly, I am enjoying your company. Well, I was enjoying your company.
Alex regained some control over herself.
You are an agent for the fleet. So now you're the cop and I'm the target. And I fell for you. All the charm and false concern. You were using me, collecting information that could destroy the galaxy, you son of a bitch.
Zeal tried to remain calm.
Your points are well taken. Hey, I fell for you too, but this seems like a severe way to end it. Look, I've never done a double cross. I find that sort of thing too risky. You and I have a verbal contract. As I said, I work contract by contract.
Alex broke in.
And item by item, too. And you're after mine, and I cannot let that happen.
I'm on your side, seriously. I'm with you until your job is done. Trust me on this. I know how important this is, not just to you, but in general. As I told you, I know your item represents some sort of power. Do you think I want that kind of thing handed over to the types of jerks that hire me? I am not a fan of the military or the police. Civil order is a good thing, but it is handled by some real nutbags.
He tried to think of a way to prove himself.
Look, I've already implicated myself with you. We were seen together in 20s Town. I'm sure that some scanner somewhere picked up the EM block on my house. I even lied to the police back there in the hangar. Okay, I could probably get those charges dropped, but it would seriously hurt my business. Honestly, I am not trying to set you up. I want to help.
Alex was softening a little. Zeal was crafty enough. If he had wanted to turn her in, he already had plenty of opportunities.
You lied for me back there? Or did you lie for yourself to get more credits?
I lied to protect you. They showed me your picture and profile straight up. I had to hope that you had taken my hint and gotten out of the hangar or something. I didn't want them to get to you, and I didn't want them dragging me in and questioning me about you. As you pointed out, I have already deduced too much. Since I don't know the whole picture, I didn't know what I could or could not say to keep you safe. I also couldn't try to steer them away without raising suspicion. They had followed me from 20s Town.
Alex sat and thought for a while. Zeal looked at her on the intercom monitor and then looked around the lounge. It didn't look nearly as plush and extravagant as it had earlier. He spoke more to himself than to the intercom.
Had to do it, didn't I? Had to begin to have feelings. It always ends in disaster. At some point, someone has to leave. I just didn't think it would be me this time. Certainly not this way.
Looking around the room, he went to the cabinet and pulled out the evac suit and began climbing in it. He managed to get into the main body of the suit, but couldn't figure out the helmet or gloves, both more easily donned with help from the outside. Finally, he threw them on the sofa as he slumped down on the sofa himself.
Screw it.
Katz was not the kind of person that gave up on most things, but this was a cut Zeal wanted to let bleed for a while. Alex suddenly thought of the hurt child watching a father that he loved walk out of the door for the last time. She realized entropy always leads to chaos, and there is only one way to prevent entropy: inject energy into the system. It was time for her to take a risk, inject a little energy, and perhaps conduct a test of her own. She poked at the console, and the bulkhead between the forward cabin and lounge opened. Neither of them moved for several minutes. The fact that Zeal did not rush her, or even apologize, or plead, meant more to her. She felt that he was internalizing, and that meant he did have feelings. And that, in turn, probably meant that he had been telling the truth. Still, she needed to be more careful than she had been. She walked back to the archway between the forward cabin and the lounge and leaned against the arch. When she saw Zeal in the poorly managed evac suit, she suppressed a snicker. She folded her arms across her chest as a sign of indignation rather than keeping back the cold. "Okay, I will trust that up to this point you have not set me up or been planning a double cross. But from this point forward, I'm going to assume that you could at any moment. If credits drive you, as you have pointed out, higher-ups have a lot more than I will ever have, so they may try to buy you out. Besides, we are stuck in this boat. If I take you somewhere and drop you off, I would just leave more breadcrumbs and you would be out of my sight and my control. But the first chance I get, I'm creating some safe distance between us." Zeal looked at her earnestly.
"Fair enough. I don't blame you one bit. I sort of get it now. I'm the unstable one."
She didn't understand his last statement, but she wasn't going to worry about it for the moment. She looked at him. "We have many hours ahead in a cold, unstable ship. I trust that you aren't stupid enough to do me any harm. You value yourself too much. Without me, you are sitting in a death trap, so we might as well relax." She headed to the sofa. Zeal was slumped in the middle of it. She said, "Scoot down to that end. I don't want you near me right now." Zeal gave her a sad smile. "No problem, sweetheart." He moved down to the wing furthest from the forward cabin. Alex picked up the evac helmet and threw it at him, and then sat at the wing against the bridge bulkhead. The 2 meters of space between them might as well have been a universe. Alex thought about the whole mess. It seemed for a moment that she had bottled herself up with an undercover agent in a ship headed toward her adversary. But looking at the almost helpless Zeal in his poorly fitted evac suit, she realized that was not the case. He had revealed several weak spots to her, the little child and the mighty cats that couldn't fly in a universe of pilots. He put himself in her hands when he gave her his wrecked ship to fly. He told her his business, a business that exists only on its secrecy. She realized he trusted her more than she trusted him. She said in a cold manner, "I'm sorry, I may have overreacted." While she wanted to offer the apology, she didn't want him to feel completely forgiven. She thought over his business. It made sense. What Zeal does would pay a lot. It would also provide him a great deal of protection at times and put him at high risk at times, which he enjoys. The skills he possesses are perfect for the job. What better way for a government or an insurance company to obtain the things they were after while protecting themselves? If he were to get caught, he's only an ex-con that has gone bad again, and their hands are clean. Certainly his clients kept their connections with him virtually invisible. Alex thought it through, and piece after piece fell into place. The silence had been too deep. She decided to shrink the gap that had come between them. You can only stop entropy with energy. That is why you can move credits so easily. You need a way to get paid without a government or company appearing to have paid you. Some government or agency helped you set up that list of agencies and corporations so credits could be washed before they reached you. That's how you get the toys, too. The fleet would notice anyone gathering that many sophisticated devices, but you can buy them through those loosely connected companies, and no one would notice a thing. Some of your clients probably encourage it. Zeal leaned back, folding his hands on his lap. Very well deduced. Alex's expression lightened a little. I don't know that I agree with what you do, but I cannot disapprove either. I know the fleet and the affiliate depend on the intelligence they gather, but you can still hurt people. You certainly present some risk, to me at least. What you do gives one side an edge. You might do a job to benefit your own selfish governmental interests, or you might not even be aware of some greater picture. Zeal's expression became one of understanding.
If you label me as an agent or spy, I can see how you would have that emotional tug-of-war. But there is a difference between me and a spy or agent or cop. I do not take orders. I am never in the wrong place at the wrong time. I do not play for one side. I have refused as many jobs as I have taken. I am a free agent, and work hard to keep it that way. I chose to help you for the same reason I choose all my jobs. It was intriguing, it seemed exciting, and it had the potential for a payoff. In this case, maybe not credits, but it seemed worth it to me.
So it is only about the payoff?
Certainly. What isn't? Why did you become an officer? Because you wanted to do something honorable, something good for society. The feeling you got was your payoff. Why did you accept your orders? Because you wanted to do a good job, which was your payoff. We are all driven that way. You disobeyed orders because you felt there was some larger payoff. In your case, I did hope to recoup my losses, but the real payoff was in learning about your secret and in learning more about you. As I said, you were growing on me, and hanging around you was sort of fun.
Zeal genuinely tried to get Alex to understand it from his point of view.
You may still think of me as a thief, and you may think that criminals do not have a sense of morality, but I do. I work for a price, but we all do. But I have given myself the ability to choose my jobs, and I avoid the ones that I feel are too unethical. You know, digging up secrets on a politician to throw an election or planting false information. I've put myself in a position where I can allow my ethics to control my actions. I cannot be ordered against my will. We may disagree on what is ethical, but I do have my own conscience, and I stick to it tightly. Sure, I can make a mistake, but so can a cop, an admiral, a doctor or engineer, or a president.
Alex picked up her drink and sipped it. Don't make me think you have that kind of conscience. Zeal shifted on the sofa, pulled one leg up, and placed the heel of his shoe on the edge of the cushion, and wrapped his arms around the bent knee. His tone became reflective.
When I was stealing stuff for credits, I worried about it. That's why I stole from corporations or the extremely wealthy. Believe it or not, it did bother me, but not enough to keep me from doing it. The pay was just too good, and I enjoyed the challenge. After I sat in the pen for a while, I realized that it was my conscience that got me caught. I didn't run hard enough. When I got out and was presented the opportunity to do the same type of work and make the same number of credits, but with the law on my side, I had to think a bit. Then I realized this kind of stuff is going to happen whether I do it or not.
He dropped his raised knee, straightened out his legs, and stretched his arms out across the top of the sofa back, trying to close the distance between the two of them, but also opening himself up in a vulnerable, unprotected fashion.
I actually feel good stealing from criminals. I can use my craft, have the thrills, make good credits, and do society a favor. As for the political and military stuff, I told myself as long as I worked for all governments and I selected my contracts carefully, I couldn't be held responsible for anything. I can be part of the balance. If I enlisted with a single organization, like the affiliate or the Amans, I could possibly upset the balance. I could get caught in the ethical web that you are picking at right now. I could end up in the wrong place, at the wrong time. Yes, Alex, I do have a conscience, and I've felt guilt, but I have reconciled it.
Alex was speechless again. It was so overwhelming. So much of it rang true. This once criminal with a conscience was clearly the same person that could not risk a young child's life in a daring escape. It was the hurt child trying to make his way in the world, but still be clean enough that a father would accept him. Zeal was not the criminal she felt he was. Undercover work is highly regarded in the fleet. The risks are high, and so are the rewards. But the work, its moral standing, is shady. To provide a secret to the fleet or to the affiliate means you have to steal a secret from another concerned party. It was an issue Alex had never been able to solve for herself, but it was clear that Zeal had. If there was a way to be fair about it, his way was about as fair as it could be. Stealing stolen goods from criminals presented a similar dilemma for her. Returning a stolen item to its rightful owner can only be seen as a good thing. It saves citizens credits by reducing the amount of funds spent on police work and lowers insurance rates. Yet it must be accomplished by violating someone's privacy and property, with the possible risk of injury or death. To have stolen contraband carefully stolen back is not a lot different from having the police raid the premises and retrieve the contraband, except one is a legal procedure and the other is another form of theft. She had always felt that such things should be solved by the due process of law, not by a self-empowered repossessing private eye. But if the authorities accepted it, how could she not? It was a moral tangle that Alex did not have the time or energy to deal with. What stuck out most in her mind was that Zeal worked with the fleet a lot. She had learned enough about him, seen his ethics, touched his childhood, and experienced his human cowardice. She wanted to like him and trust him, and perhaps even befriend him. Still, her conscious mind and training kept putting up a warning flag, forcing her to take added steps with caution. She was tired and feeling the Pleiades' pleasures. She stretched her legs out in front of her and leaned her head back against the wall. "Well, Zeal, this does surprise me indeed, and I have to say it changes my opinion of you, but it also makes me nervous. You gave me quite a fright, and I am not yet convinced you aren't a part of my current dilemma. In another time, another place, another situation, things might have been different. But I can't think about that now. I haven't had solid sleep for close to 24 hours.
Zeal got up. "You get some sleep here on the sofa. I'll take one of the forward chairs. We could both use it."
He was being kind again. She wanted to let her heart go out to him, but her concerns for the sphere and the good of all humanity, and an unidentified worry feeling, forced her to keep her trust tucked tight inside. "Thanks. But I don't trust this bucket. I'll sleep up front and you take the sofa." She got up and went forward, tapped at a console for a few minutes, and then returned to the archway of the lounge. "I've set an alarm to make sure we are awake before reaching the Earth system boundary net. I've also set a motion detection alarm. It will activate in a few minutes, so don't think about trying to sneak up here. I want to trust you, Zeal. The things you told me have given me a lot to think about. For now, I just need to play it safe. Good night." She walked back to the pilot's chair, took off the overcoat, climbed into the seat and reclined it, and pulled the coat over her. Zeal got up and grabbed the blanket, but then looked down at himself in the evac suit. He was feeling quite warm in it, so he folded the blanket and walked to the entrance of the forward cabin and said, "Alex." She sat up and looked at him. He held up the folded blanket. "Here, use this as a pillow." She got up, walked over and took it from him, saying, "Thanks." As she took it, he said, "You may see me as a fleet agent and see yourself on the run from them, but we aren't on different sides, really. We were once, but we don't have to be. Good night." He returned to the sofa and stretched out on it, and she went forward and climbed back into the chair. Before long, Zeal could hear the unmistakable sounds of deep slumber coming from the bridge. Not a snore, but the heavy breathing of a person who is exhausted and has drifted into the complete blackness of sleep. He got up from the sofa and walked over to the personal facility, opened the door, and went in. He fumbled with the evac suit until he could get his cell-link neckpiece clear. Then he put his hand in front of him, palm up. Instead of projecting the digits pad and the hot list on his palm, it displayed the message, "No service," and provided a list of available options. He tapped the cell label, and his cell menu came up. Then he faced the back of the facility where there was some open wall space. He waved in a backhand gesture to the wall, as if throwing the image from his palm onto the wall, and there the image appeared. With the image now flat, crisp, and large, he began gesturing at it. First he called up the data he had gotten of the sphere and the false air ducts. He tapped at various meter readings and waved at the image to turn the wireframe globe around, examining it from all angles. Then he gestured a slicing motion down the middle of the image, and the sphere data appeared on the left, with menus and icons appearing on the right. He pointed at various icons until he called up the schematic and accompanying data he had copied from the lady mechanic's console in the hangar. The schematic came up on the right side, adjacent to the sphere's data. The schematic was of a small sliced globe much like the sphere, similar but different. He pointed and waved at the schematic, looking at various specifications and meter readings. A warning notification caught his attention, which he read carefully. Then he continued to flip through other specifications and texts on the device, at times looking over the sphere data, comparing and contrasting. There were some striking similarities, but also a few notable differences, but it was the sameness that stood out to him. He studied the images for a while, committing some of the various meter readings to his remarkable memory. Feeling he had gotten all he could from the data, he waved his hand across the images in a swiping motion, and his cell and cell link shut off. And then he left the small private room. He climbed back onto the sofa, made himself comfortable, and thought. His thoughts were a mixture of mechanical mysteries, of wireframe images, globes, and meter readings. As his mind entered that ethereal space between consciousness and sleep, he thought about Alex. His thoughts were tender and compassion-filled. Alex was joined by Eliza, and slowly the full-figured Eliza morphed into the heavy-set mechanic. Around Alex and the mechanic danced schematic lines, indicators, and warning labels as children sang in the background of his mind. He could not make out what they sang, but they sang as children always do, in simple rhythm and rhyme. With the comforting images of Alex and happy children, and the worrisome images of the mechanic and schematics, he drifted into a lonely sleep. For Alex, the deep oblivion of sleep was a blanket for quite some time. But then thoughts of chaos crawled up from the darkness. People were squabbling over nothing. A world was on fire and at war. Make-believe military rulers laid plans to oppress and dominate, and spies crept out of cracks like bloodthirsty ticks. But then a light shone brightly beside her. A glowing orb spoke to her without words. She took it up, and in a blast of shining whiteness, the spies slunk back. The rulers bowed to her. The wars stopped. The fires went out, and the people were silenced. She held the sphere aloft. She proclaimed there would be order. She exclaimed that the fighting would end. She would promulgate peace. She was the ultimate power in the universe, and there would be law and order. Terrorism would not be tolerated. Subjugation would cease. Governments would release their power, and her order would reign. If she needed to control thoughts and minds to make it happen, she would, and make everyone think about the common good with no one threatening another. But some of the people were still not happy. They began to resist. She raised the sphere and pushed them back, but still they pressed forward. Skirmishes erupted, but she snuffed them out. As soon as she would defeat one, another one would rise up like anthills appearing in an unruly garden. White blast after white blast, she and the sphere extinguished resistance in order to preserve peace. More and more the underground came, fast and faster, until she wielded the sphere like a sidearm, blast after blast, each one echoing a resounding screech. Screech, screech, sounded the small alarm. Alex quickly woke and tapped at a console, shutting it off. She got up and saw Zeal starting to rouse. She checked to be sure the motion detection alarm had been shut off along with a wake-up call. It had, so she reached into the cabinet she had put the sphere's briefcase in and pulled the case out. She didn't feel safe leaving it out of her sight. Fleeting memories of her dream left her uneasy. It would take some time for her to rebuild trust in Zeal. She carried the burden with her into the lounge, where she entered into the comfort station to take care of her business and freshen herself. She was thankful that luxury craft like his carried water. Not enough for showers, but enough for drinking and the washing of hands and face. The cool, bracing splashes proved uplifting to her, and she began to hum and occasionally sing snatches of rhyme. Zeal slowly got up. He stood up and walked to the bridge to stretch and move about and get himself going. When he entered the forward cabin, he suddenly had to steady himself on the arm of the co-pilot's seat. He was not used to the moving streaks of hyperspace. Seeing it right from sleep, he experienced vertigo, but just for a moment or two. He quickly got his bearings and started to return to the lounge, his poorly fitting evac suit giving him the appearance of a careless circus clown. Just as he crossed the threshold between the bridge and the lounge, he heard Alex in the bath singing,
Keeper, keeper of the sphere, guide the future far and near, hum hum hum, dee dee da da.
He stopped in his tracks, and his thoughts turned inward. He stared at the facility door as if he could still see the images his cell had projected inside the room hours earlier. He could almost hear the click-clack of plastic three-dimensional puzzle pieces putting themselves together. Alex continued her pseudo-singing of the child's rhyme, half words and half hummed and la-dee-dahs, and the puzzle suddenly completed. Alex emerged from the little room carrying the briefcase. On seeing Zeal, she said, "Morning," in a cheery manner. She had slept well. Her dream had unsettled her, but the splash of water on her face had washed it from memory. She was feeling better about Zeal, but still wanted to keep a little distance between them. Her greeting shook him from his revelations. "Good morning," he returned. His new insight had sealed his wounds. With his self-bleeding done, he felt full and in control of himself again. He was clear on his feelings for Alex and clear on his path. He walked with his assured gait to the bath, the evac suit rumpling all the way, a reminder of his lesser self that he seemed unaware of. The sight of the proud cats in the clown suit made Alex snicker. He stopped just as he was about to enter the bathroom and shot her a look of curiosity. Seeing that she was looking at his attire, he looked down at himself and then raised his signature shrug. "You'll never catch me with my pants down." He went into the facility. Alex went to the forward cabin and put the briefcase back in the cabinet, and then put Zeal's overcoat back on to fight the chill in the ship. She sat in the pilot's seat and began checking the consoles. Zeal, having finished his business, came out of the little private room and tossed the evac suit on the sofa. He looked at the shut-down food dispensers and the fold-down tray containing only a few crackers and one Renarian egg. He picked up the 2 cups, went into the bath again, washed them out, and filled them with water. Returning to the lounge, he picked up 1 cracker and shoved it in his mouth. Then he picked up the tray and cups and carried the lot forward. He set down 1 cup, began munching the cracker, and then offered the tray and a cup to Alex. In a muffled fashion, he said, "1 last egg and a couple of crackers and a cup of water. Not a great breakfast, but it'll do." He handed her the cup and pushed the tray at her. She eyed the egg and then looked at Zeal. "I can take the crackers. Why don't you take the egg?" Zeal said, chewing, "Already had one. You take what's left. And speaking of what's left of this trip?" Alex had seen the tray when she entered the lounge earlier, so she knew Zeal was lying, but sometimes a deceit can be a kindness. She smiled at him. "1 minute you are tearing me apart, the next you are trying to keep me together." She handed him the blanket she had used as a pillow, and then took a bite of the egg and a good drink of water. "Well, we're a few hours from the system boundary net. Considering this bucket of yours, from the outer net to the Earth-lunar net will be another 30 minutes or so, then flying by the rules 2 hours through the lanes and Atmo." "And then what?" Zeal asked, sipping some water. "I'm not quite sure. Somehow I need to get into the fleet systems and see if I can get some intel on my original orders, see if I can figure out where they started from." "Do you have any guesses?" Alex looked at him. Though her trust had been shaken, some details she would have to let go of. He was clever, and as he pointed out, there would be 2 psychologies in use, and that could give her an edge. "The orders that started this mess came from Admiral Smalls, but I don't know if they are his own doing or if someone is using him. Somehow I need to get into his system, and that's going to be tricky." Zeal grinned. "Hacking computers is easy. The trick is knowing which networks to start with. Frankly, you happen to have the right tool available. Wrapping the blanket over his shoulders, he spread out his arms and held the pose for a moment as he smiled a big, toothy smile. Feeling relieved, she said,
"Well, that's one barrier down if we can get to a safe terminal. But if Smalls is being used, that information will be deeply hidden and encrypted."
Zeal waved his hand, blowing her concern away.
"None of this is a problem. Let me point out, as you so aggressively called me earlier, I'm a spy. By the way, would you please never call me that again? I'm a private eye, okay?"
Alex rolled her eyes.
Okay, I said I was sorry."
Zeal continued.
"Good. Anyway, as I informed you, the fleet has been a client of mine, and so has the affiliate. I've even had some small dealings with Smalls, the grumpy old hard ass. Getting in and around shouldn't be a problem. If there is a track, I can find it and get it. Cracking it open may take some time, but it doesn't have to be done on the spot. But all this is not the real question at hand. Let me ask again. And then what?"
Alex looked at him puzzled. Zeal picked up on her confusion.
"You are dealing with something that represents power. As you pointed out, decades won't be long enough. You have been concerned with avoiding whoever is after you. You took a rather basic approach, using the way in as the way out, that is, finding your adversaries so you can keep an eye on them, trail them, allowing you to avoid them. But then what?"
Alex looked down in disappointment.
"I really don't know. I was hoping that I could completely disappear, change my name, get a job, and lay low."
Zeal spoke with deliberate clearness.
"Lay low for a few decades? For the rest of your life? Power that would cause the high and moral Alexandria Novastra to disobey orders and throw away her life will not allow you to lay low for long. Even if you killed your current adversary, there would be another, and another, and another. So I ask you again, then what? If you could have anything you want, if you could get any sort of outcome out of all of this, what would it be?"
Alex was shaken. She knew Zeal was right. She was so far from solving her current position, she couldn't imagine finding a new keeper and passing on her troubles.
"If I could have anything, I would want my life back. I wish none of this had happened to me at all. You mentioned it on the way to the hangar. I've had to go through some big changes. I was an officer. Now I'm on the run from them. I will probably never see my family or friends ever again. Well, let's just say there are several other aspects of my old life that have been turned upside down, and I can't see a way to undo. If I could have any outcome, I would wish to have my life back."
Alex felt weighed down, empty, alone, and feared a dependency she did not understand. Zeal could see and feel her pain.
"Wow, that wasn't what I expected. I'm sorry, Alex. I get so caught up in the fun of the chase, I sometimes forget that when you run, home is usually at your back. To me, the road can be home. Well, it used to be. But I'm learning how nice growing roots can be."
He reached out a hand and tenderly rubbed her shoulder. She looked down.
"Well, there it is, and not a damn thing I can do. You are right. I won't be able to lay low long enough. I really don't know what I can do."
Zeal gave her a reassuring smile.
"It isn't over yet. Why don't we stick to your plan for now? Maybe we'll learn something along the way. Some opportunity may present itself."
He realized he needed to bring Alex up from the depth of her thoughts.
"So how about another lesson?"
His smile gave her comfort. She nodded.
"We have some time, okay."
She thought for a moment.
"As I told you, you are better off if you understand what is actually going on. But you do need to understand the buttons, too, actually the devices that they control."
She went about describing the various devices and controls on the ship, But unlike a flying tutor who names the function in a useful sequence, she provided more detail about the related device's effects on the density generators or atmospheric flight surfaces, or other aspects of the deep workings of the ship, and how they allowed a vessel to do what a vessel does. Her newfound mistrust began to slowly evaporate. Zeal's charms and his helplessness in this matter were comforting to her. They were verbally practicing an energy rerouting calculation for the umpteenth time when the primary console chimed. Alex looked at the desk. "Okay, we're coming up on the pop. Let's hope this thing holds together." They both felt the heavy downward tug as the ship popped into normal space. Much to Alex's delight, it was a totally uneventful transition. The ship slowly coasted and then parked itself right at her programmed spot outside of the Sol system's outer boundary net. The stars through the window had returned to normal, with one particularly bright yellow star almost in the exact center of their view. Seeing the stars always soothed Alex. She took in a deep breath, as if she was drinking in the stellar radiance in the same way a plant enjoys the morning sun. After a pause, she continued talking, stuck in teacher mode as she pointed at the bright star. "That is Sol, the Earth's star. We are now outside of the Oort cloud and the outer boundary net. The Oort cloud is a sphere of solidified debris left over from the system's formation. Most Earthling-based colonies use their system's Oort clouds for the basis of their net boundaries. The net boundary is the system's first line of defense. It can identify Oort debris falling inward that could become cataclysmic meteoroids, or allude to attacks from outside the system, such as terrorists, pirates, or outright war machines. She tapped at some controls, turning one of the forward windows into a visual display, and then moved and zoomed the display, showing a larger bit of Oort debris. Sensors are placed on some of the larger chunks of ice. The sensors are interconnected with each other using quantum entanglement, which allows them instantaneous communication with each other, even over very large distances. If anything crosses between two or more sensors, it is detected and relayed through other sensor posts inward, giving the solar system's flight control some idea of what's coming into the system, with plenty of time to develop a risk analysis.
Zeal stopped her. "That is something I've always wondered about. How is it that ships can go faster than interstellar messages? I mean, I understand it. I understand that hyperspace travel is quicker than radio, laser, or even neutrino pulses. But if the boundary net uses an instantaneous method, why not use that for interstellar communication?"
She enjoyed a smart student. She nodded, letting Zeal know it was a good question.
In theory, quantum entanglement has no distance limit. It was first theorized centuries ago by some long-hair, Einstein or something like that. He called it spooky action at a distance. While it has no theoretical limit, there is a technical limit, though they seem to be pushing that every year. On top of that, the amount of information that we can transmit is limited to only a few bits of data, not nearly enough for vids or voice or text, but they are getting better at that too. The boundary net sensors are carefully placed to work within our current technical abilities. Entanglement relays are stationed at appropriate intervals inward toward a primary receiving station, and from there planets to moons, moons to asteroids, asteroids to satellites, until it reaches flight control. The result is an almost immediate transfer of information. But between stars there's too much open space and not enough stuff to create all the necessary relays. I guess someday that problem will be solved along with the amount of data that can be transferred. Then entanglement will be used for instant real-time communication with other solar systems, but it just isn't technically possible right now.
Zeal held up his hand as a sign to stop.
"You could have just said that it isn't technically possible yet, but I do appreciate the detail."
Alex nodded with understanding and then continued.
Anyway, the regs are that you stop outside of the outer boundary and send an AODT pulse through the net. Flight control will then send back a green light or nothing at all.
Zeal asked,
And if they don't send anything back?
If you don't receive a green light, they have assumed the data indicates an inanimate object or a threat. They will do whatever they can to get more detail. If they believe there is a threat, inner systems will be put on alert. A green light says they know who you are. Come on in and make your way toward your primary destination. As I said, the outer boundary is an early warning and targeting system, not a gate. If you bust through it and they get hold of you further in, it means some fines and restrictions, but nothing serious.
Alex sat in thought. After a few moments of silence, Zeal prompted her.
Well, what are you waiting for?
Alex let out a heavy sigh.
I'm trying to figure out which way to go. I mean, I have some tricks that would allow me to bust the net, but I doubt this bucket could handle them. On the other hand, it is your ship. You have nothing to hide from, so your AODT shouldn't raise any concerns. The question is, would we be better off sneaking or walking in? I'm just not sure.
Zeal patted her shoulder.
The best way to sneak is to walk. Look like you belong. It's less suspicious. You and Evan figured that out.
She couldn't argue with that. She tapped a console to transmit the AODT pulse, and in a matter of seconds a green light appeared on her console. She said,
"Well, that's done. Next stop, the Earth-Lunar Boundary Net."
She nudged the ship through the boundary, and then finger-danced the console. Their stomachs sank as they fell out of normal space, and the view of the bright yellow star smeared and became ghostly and translucent. 30 minutes later, they felt the tug as they popped into normal space again and parked just outside of the Earth-Lunar Boundary Net. This boundary net is much tighter. Real-time communication is possible, and with a greater desire and need to deter threats, the checks and confirmations are more complete. But Zeal's advice still held. Alex pulsed the AODT through the net, and within seconds an image appeared on her viewer.
Sentry XB3 Zeal Cats, this is Earth Flight Control. What is your purpose and destination?
Earth Flight Control, this is Sentry XB3 Zeal Cats. Our vid circuitry is out. Our purpose is business. The destination is Earth. Southeastus Owen Spaceport.
XB3 Zeal Cats, your flight plan is now on file. You are under instrument flight rules. Proceed to orbit 10 and inward. Earth Flight Control out.
Another green light appeared on the console. Alex looked at Zeal and smiled.
"We're in."
She turned her attention to the console. The ship passed through the net and gradually increased speed in a direct route toward the orbit lanes.
Zeal asked, "How much longer?"
Alex casually said,
40 minutes to orbit 10, an hour working down to orbit 1, and 20 minutes from the atmosphere to the ground.
Why Southeastus? Why not New Europe? That's where Smalls is.
Alex was busy at the console. Suddenly the bulkhead between the lounge and sleep quarters opened up. The lights brightened, and the cabin began to feel warmer.
No need to reroute power for the field generators anymore.
She smiled at Zeal and continued,
"Owens is my home field. It's near my primary fleet base, Jackson. I know the area and the people. They did look for me there, but as you said some time ago, the way out is in. They may not think to look there again so soon. I can use my connections to help me move around."
Zeal nodded. "Smart. It has been said there is safety near the heart of danger. You're starting to think like a thief." Alex gave him a stern look. He chuckled. "Just kidding, kiddo." They had entered the system with the Earth almost between them and the Moon, so there was not a thick intra-system traffic lane to enter. Earth's shroud of craft and debris glistened brightly in the nearly direct sunlight, almost completely blocking the view of the mother planet. Alex gave Zeal some lessons in orbit lane regulations and etiquette. They were nearing orbit 10. The cabin had warmed up, and Alex knew she would be stuck at the controls for a while, so she got up and hung Zeal's overcoat over the back of the pilot's seat. Zeal took off the blanket he had wrapped over his shoulders, folded it up, and returned it and the food tray and cups to the lounge, and then tapped up 2 cups of coffee and brought them forward. Alex thanked him. They entered Orbit 10 and worked their way down to Orbit Lane 3 without incident. Alex explained to Zeal that now, as they were in Orbit 3, she would have to confer with Flight Control to receive her Orbit 1 entry and exit windows. She would need to maneuver the ship while in Orbit 3 in order to hit the designated entry and exit marks.
Zeal asked, "So we are within the communication satellites now, right?"
Yes, why? Zeal put his palm in front of him, and the digits pad appeared.
"I thought I would go ahead and set up some ground transportation. I don't think we should use a cab. The computers are too easily controlled by the authorities."
He gave Alex a wink.
"But I can rent us a nice Aero."
He tapped a label that read, "Search." He tapped and pushed and flipped until he found the connection he wanted, and then tapped it. A young lady appeared on his palm.
Owen Spaceport Rentals, may I help you?
He entered into a casual business exchange with the young lady, securing for himself the rental of a high-powered machine. Finally, she asked,
When can we expect you to pick it up, Mr. Katz?
Zeal looked at Alex, who was dutifully watching the orbit traffic and her instruments. She looked at him and said, "Probably another 40 minutes or so." Zeal looked at his palm and said,
"In about 40 minutes.
Okay, Mr. Katz, we'll have it ready for you. Check in at our desk when you arrive, and you should be good to go.
Zeal thanked the young lady and closed his palm, and then got out of the co-pilot's seat and said,
"I've got to hit the head."
Alex shot him a curious look, not understanding the arcane phraseology, but quickly returned to her controls once she figured out what he meant. Zeal walked into the lounge and stepped into the facility, closing the door behind him. Once inside, he held his palm up again, his cell link projecting the digits pad and hot list. He tapped a label that read, "Text." A new hot list appeared. He scrolled through it and tapped, "Fleet." A sub-list appeared. He tapped, "Admiral Smalls." A message box and tiny keyboard appeared. He threw the image onto the facility wall and tapped out, "Looking for Novastra?"